In 1972, a French geologist named Michel Siffre crawled into a cave in Del Rio, Texas. This was a NASA-funded experiment. They wanted to understand what happens to the human body during prolonged isolation. Because if you are going to send people to Mars someday, you need to know what being cut off from every time cue on Earth actually does to a person. No clocks, no sunlight, no phone calls, no way to tell if it was noon or midnight. Siffre ate when he was hungry, slept when he was tired, and tried to keep a log of his days. He stayed underground for 6 months. And when the surface team finally radioed down to tell him it was over, day 179, Siffre was stunned. Because by his own careful reckoning, it had only been about 151 days. He had lost 28 days. Not in the way you lose track of time on a good vacation. Siffre was miserable. He was depressed. At points, he was suicidal. He tried to befriend a mouse, and when the mouse died, he wept. And yet somehow, through all of that suffering, his internal clock was running slow. Almost a month of his life simply did not register. But Siffre was not the strangest case, not even close. In 1989, a French interior designer named Véronique Le Guen entered an underground cave in southern France for a similar experiment. She stayed for 111 days. When they brought her back to the surface and told her the date, she broke down. Because by her count, only 42 days had passed. Let me say that again. She experienced 42 days. Reality delivered 111. Her brain had compressed nearly 3 months of lived experience into 6 weeks. And what happened next was even worse. Le Guen fell into a severe depression after the experiment. She could not reconcile the life she remembered with the life she had apparently lived. She took her own life the following year. And then there was Stefania Follini, an Italian interior designer. Apparently, this was a popular profession among cave volunteers, who spent 4 months underground in a cave in New Mexico. When she emerged, she thought it was still summer. It was not. It was deep into autumn. Now, why am I telling you this? Because these are not stories about unusual people having unusual reactions. These are stories about what your brain does when you strip away every external time cue: the sun, the clock, the schedule, the social rhythms that anchor you in the day. And what your brain does, it turns out, is lie. Massively, confidently, consistently. It constructs a feeling of time passing that has almost nothing to do with how much time has actually passed. And here is the part that should genuinely unsettle you. That same brain, the one that lost 28 days in a cave, the one that compressed 3 months into 6 weeks, that brain is the one telling you right now that time is flowing, that the present moment is real, that the past is gone and the future has not happened yet. What if it is wrong about that too? The book that sent me down this particular rabbit hole is called Your Brain is a Time Machine by a neuroscientist named Dean Buonomano. He is a professor at UCLA, runs a lab that studies how neural circuits encode time, and, here is what makes the book special, he had the unusual courage to wander out of his own field. Buonomano is a neuroscientist who decided to take physics seriously. Not pop physics seriously, where you read a Brian Greene book and nod along. Actually seriously. He engaged with the equations, with the philosophy, with what relativity and quantum mechanics actually say about the nature of time. And what he found shook him. Because what physics says about time, and what his brain, the organ he has spent his career studying, tells him about time, are not just different, they are incompatible. They cannot both be true. The book has been out for several years now. It is well regarded in both neuroscience and popular science circles. And I think it asks the single most disturbing question I have encountered in any science book. The question is this: what if the most fundamental feature of your conscious experience, the feeling that you exist in a flowing present, has no counterpart in physical reality whatsoever? Not because physics has not figured it out yet, but because physics actively denies it. Let me build the case piece by piece. Start with something you do every single day without thinking about it. You tap your foot to music. You clap along with the beat. Seems trivial, right? But think about what your brain has to do to make that possible. By the time a sound wave hits your eardrum, travels through the auditory nerve, gets processed in the auditory cortex, and generates a motor command to your hand or foot, hundreds of milliseconds have passed. If your brain were simply reacting to each beat as it arrived, you would always be late. You would clap after the beat every single time. But you do not. You clap on the beat. Sometimes you even clap slightly before it, which means your brain is not reacting to the present. It is predicting the future. Buonomano's core argument is that this is not some cute trick your auditory system learned. This is what brains are for. Every animal brain, from the simplest to the most complex, is fundamentally a prediction engine. A machine that takes in patterns from the past and uses them to anticipate what comes next. A hummingbird returns to the same flowers at precisely timed intervals because its brain has modeled how quickly nectar replenishes. A dog catches a frisbee not by tracking where the disc is, but by computing where it will be. An outfielder starts running before the ball is hit because the pitcher's windup contains enough information, apparently, for the brain to begin calculating a trajectory. You can test this yourself right now, by the way. Try clapping on the beat of a song. Easy. Now try clapping exactly between the beats, on the offbeat. Dramatically harder. Your brain is so committed to predicting the next beat that fighting that prediction feels almost physically uncomfortable. This is what Buonomano means when he calls your brain a time machine. Not a time machine in the science fiction sense. You cannot travel to the past. But a time machine in the sense that your brain's entire architecture is built to simulate the near future, to live slightly ahead of the present moment, to never actually be where you think you are in time. And that, it turns out, is only the beginning of the deception. Let me ask you something. How much of today do you think you actually saw? I mean, visually. How much of the visual information that hit your retinas today was actually processed and assembled into your conscious experience? Here is one way to think about it. Every time you move your eyes, and you do this about 3 to 5 times per second, constantly, all day, your brain performs a maneuver called saccadic suppression. During the rapid movement of the eye from one fixation point to another, your visual system essentially goes offline. The image would be a useless blur anyway, so your brain just cuts it, deletes the footage, and then seamlessly stitches together the stable images from before and after the movement so that your experience of the world feels continuous. You also blink roughly 15 to 20 times per minute. Each blink lasts about 150 to 400 milliseconds. That does not sound like much, but add it up over a day and you are losing roughly an hour of visual input. And if you are driving at 100 kilometers per hour, which is about 60 miles per hour, every single blink means you are effectively blind for about 5 meters. Formula One drivers, incidentally, train themselves to blink only on specific sections of the track. Straight sections, where nothing unexpected should happen. Because at 300 kilometers per hour, a blink is 25 meters of blindness. And here is what is remarkable. You never notice any of this. You do not experience gaps. You do not see the cuts. Your visual experience is smooth, continuous, and whole, like a movie. But it is not a movie. It is a post-production edit. Your brain is running an editing suite that takes discontinuous, gappy, interrupted sensory data and assembles it into the seamless film you call reality. Which raises an uncomfortable question. If your brain is already editing what you see, already deleting gaps and smoothing transitions, and constructing a continuous experience from discontinuous data, what else might it be constructing? I want to tell you about a man named Clive Waring. And I want to warn you, this story is one of the most disturbing case studies in all of neuroscience. Not because it is gory or violent, because it is existential. Clive Waring was a British musicologist, an expert on Renaissance-era music, a conductor, a singer, a man who by all accounts had a brilliant and deeply cultured mind. In 1985, he contracted herpes simplex encephalitis, a viral infection that attacked his brain. Specifically, it destroyed his hippocampus, the structure responsible for converting short-term memories into long-term ones. The result was one of the most severe cases of amnesia ever documented. Clive Waring lives, and he is still alive today, in a perpetual present that lasts roughly 7 to 30 seconds. Every half minute or so, he effectively wakes up. He has no memory of what happened moments ago. He does not know where he is or how he got there. He believes every single time that he has just this moment regained consciousness after a long period of nothing. His diary is one of the most haunting documents in medical literature. Page after page after page of entries like this. 8:31 a.m. Now I am really, completely awake. Then that line is crossed out. 9:06 a.m. Now I am perfectly, overwhelmingly awake. Crossed out. 9:34 a.m. Now I am superlatively, actually awake. Crossed out. The handwriting gets larger, more frantic, more emphatic, as if by writing harder, pressing the pen deeper into the page, he could make this moment stick. He wrote in enormous, desperate letters, "I am alive." But the moment he wrote it, it was already gone. When interviewed, Waring described his experience with a sentence I cannot get out of my head. He said it was exactly like being dead. Not unconscious, not sleeping, dead. He said, "I have not heard anything, not seen anything, not touched anything, not smelled anything. It is like being dead. For all these years, the whole of my life has been spent dead." His wife, Deborah Waring, wrote a memoir about their life together. She described visiting him and watching the same scene repeat. Every time she walked into the room, Clive would greet her with overwhelming joy, as if they had been separated for years. Tears, embraces, declarations of love. If she stepped out to use the bathroom and came back 2 minutes later, the exact same scene would replay. The same surprise, the same tears, the same desperate joy. Because for Clive, she had been gone forever. Every reunion was the first reunion, every moment was the first moment. Now, why does Clive Wearing matter for our question about time? Because his case reveals something that most of us never think about. The feeling of existing in a continuous present. The feeling that this moment is connected to the moment before it. That your life is a coherent stream. That there is a you persisting through time. That feeling depends on memory. Specifically, on short-term memory, on the brain's ability to hold the very recent past in a kind of buffer while the present unfolds. Take that buffer away, and consciousness does not disappear. Clive Wearing is conscious. He can speak, he can reason, he can play piano with startling proficiency, because musical performance is stored in a different brain system, procedural memory, which his virus did not touch. But his consciousness has no depth, no continuity, no flow. What Clive Wearing's tragedy tells us is that the flow of time, the river you feel yourself moving through right now, is not a feature of the universe. It is a feature of a specific brain mechanism, a mechanism that can be damaged, a mechanism that can break. And if it can break, then it was being constructed in the first place. Okay, so far I have been talking about neuroscience, about what happens inside the skull. The brain edits reality. It predicts the future. It constructs the feeling of temporal flow from memory and anticipation. All of this is strange, but it is the kind of strange you can wrap your head around. You can file it under "the brain is weird" and move on. But I need to take you somewhere else now, somewhere much more uncomfortable. Because the neuroscience turns out to be only half of the problem. The other half comes from physics. And physics does not just suggest that the flow of time is a brain construction. Physics seems to say that the flow of time is not a feature of reality at all. Bear with me here. You have probably heard of Einstein's theory of special relativity. Even if you do not remember the details, you know the gist. Time is relative. It passes differently depending on how fast you are moving. Something E equals mc squared. Fine, but there is a specific consequence of relativity that almost nobody talks about. And it is, I think, one of the most disturbing ideas in all of science. It is called the relativity of simultaneity. Here is the thought experiment. Imagine you are standing on a train platform. A train is moving past you at very high speed. In the exact middle of the train, someone sets off a flash of light. The light expands outward in all directions at the speed of light, toward the front of the train and toward the back of the train simultaneously. Now, from the perspective of a person sitting inside the train, the light hits the front wall and the back wall at the same time. Obviously, the flash was in the middle, the train car is symmetrical, the light travels at the same speed in both directions. Simultaneous. But from your perspective, standing on the platform, the back wall of the train is moving toward the light, and the front wall is moving away from it. So the light reaches the back wall first, not simultaneous. And here is the key. Both perspectives are correct. Not in a hand-wavy, it depends on your point of view way. Both are physically, objectively, completely correct descriptions of reality. There is no fact of the matter about which event happened first. The universe does not have a preference. Most science communicators stop here and say, well, that is just how relativity works, and then they move on to black holes or something. But I want you to sit with this for a moment, because the implication is staggering. If two events can be simultaneous in one reference frame and non-simultaneous in another, then there is no universal present. There is no single moment of now that stretches across the universe, synchronizing everything. Your now and my now are the same only because we are standing roughly still relative to each other. Start moving, and our nows diverge. And this is where the physicist Roger Penrose came in with something that I think qualifies as one of the great thought experiments of the 20th century. Penrose asks you to imagine something very simple. Two people walk past each other on a sidewalk. Just an ordinary street. They are moving in opposite directions at a normal walking pace, maybe 4 or 5 kilometers per hour. Locally, in their immediate surroundings, their realities are almost perfectly identical. The same street, the same weather, the same moment. No detectable difference. But relativity says that their planes of simultaneity, the set of events across the universe that each person would define as happening now, are tilted relative to each other. And the further away you look, the bigger that tilt becomes. Penrose calculated what this means for something far away, specifically for the Andromeda Galaxy, which is about 2.5 million light-years from Earth. And what he found is this. The person walking toward Andromeda has a plane of simultaneity that is tilted forward in Andromeda's timeline. The person walking away from Andromeda has a plane tilted backward. And the difference between their two nows, at Andromeda, not on the sidewalk, is about 2 days. Let me say that again. Two people, passing each other at walking speed on an ordinary street, disagree about what is happening right now in the Andromeda Galaxy by roughly 48 hours. This is called the Andromeda Paradox, and its implications are, well, let me give you the version that keeps physicists up at night. Imagine there is an alien civilization in Andromeda. They are currently debating whether to launch a fleet to destroy Earth. In one person's now, the person walking toward Andromeda, the decision has already been made. The fleet has launched. The order has been given. It is done. In the other person's now, the person walking in the opposite direction, the debate is still ongoing. The council has not yet voted. The future is undecided. Both of these are equally valid descriptions of reality. Right now, on the same sidewalk. And if you scale the distance up, not 2.5 million light-years, but 10 billion light-years, the kind of distances we can actually observe with our telescopes, the disagreement between those two walking humans is not 2 days. It is centuries, millennia. An alien civilization at the edge of the observable universe, looking at Earth right now, might see a planet in the 19th century, or the 25th, depending on which direction they are strolling. This is not speculation. This is not a fringe theory. This is what special relativity, one of the most thoroughly tested theories in the history of science, requires. And if you take it seriously, it leads somewhere very dark. The place it leads is called the block universe. Here is the idea. If there is no universal now, then there is no objective way to divide the universe into past, present, and future. Those categories are local, personal, observer-dependent, like up and down on a round planet. Up means something different in Tokyo and in Buenos Aires, but neither is wrong. Similarly, now means something different depending on your motion, and neither is wrong. But if there is no objective present, then there is no objective distinction between what has happened and what will happen. The past is not gone. The future is not unwritten. Both are there, out there. in the same way that Paris is there even when you are in New York. You cannot see it, you cannot visit it without traveling, but it exists. It is real. This is the block universe. The idea that the universe is not a three-dimensional stage on which time passes, but a four-dimensional block of space-time in which every event, your birth, your death, the formation of the earth, the extinction of the sun, is equally real, equally present, equally now. The German mathematician Hermann Minkowski, who was, incidentally, one of Einstein's professors, put it like this in a lecture in 1908. He said, "Henceforth, space by itself and time by itself are doomed to fade away into mere shadows, and only a kind of union of the two will preserve an independent reality." That was 1908, over 100 years ago, and physics has only confirmed it since. In the block universe, time does not flow. Nothing moves through time. The river metaphor, time as a river carrying you from past to future, is completely wrong. The river is frozen. It was always frozen. Every moment that has ever existed, or will ever exist, is just sitting there, embedded in the block, like frames in a film reel that no one is projecting. And somewhere in that block, there is a particular arrangement of neurons that is convinced, absolutely, unshakably convinced, that it is alive, that this moment is special, that the past is gone, and the future is coming. That arrangement of neurons is you. Pay close attention to this next part, because this is where it gets genuinely strange. I have spent most of this video talking about two different problems. The neuroscience problem: your brain constructs the feeling of time from predictions and memory. And the physics problem: the equations of our best theories contain no flowing time, no moving present, no distinction between past and future. But these two problems are usually discussed separately. Neuroscientists talk about time perception. Physicists talk about the block universe. They publish in different journals, attend different conferences, use different vocabularies. Buonomano's insight, and I think it is genuinely brilliant, is to smash them together and ask what the collision means. And what it means is this: every other illusion your brain produces has a physical counterpart. Think about color. You look at a red apple and you experience redness. That redness is not out there in the world. It is a construction of your visual cortex. The apple is not red. The apple reflects electromagnetic radiation at a wavelength of roughly 700 nanometers, and your brain translates that into the experience of red. Color is an illusion, but it is an illusion that corresponds to something real. There is a physical quantity, electromagnetic wavelength, that the illusion is tracking. Same with sound. The rich, warm tone of a cello is not in the air. The air contains pressure waves. Your auditory cortex constructs the experience of sound from those waves. Illusion, yes, but an illusion correlated with a physical phenomenon. Same with smell. The scent of coffee does not exist in the molecules. It exists in your olfactory cortex's interpretation of those molecules. But the molecules are real. Same with temperature, with texture, with pain, with every single thing your brain conjures into your subjective experience. Illusion upon illusion upon illusion, but every one of them corresponds to something out there, something physical, something measurable. Every one, except the flow of time. The flow of time has no physical counterpart. There is no equation in physics that contains now. There is no law that distinguishes the past from the future. The equations of physics are time-symmetric They work exactly the same in both directions. There is no variable that corresponds to the feeling of the present moment sliding forward. When a physicist writes down the state of the universe, there is nothing, absolutely nothing, in the mathematics that says this moment is happening right now. Let that settle in for a moment. Every other brain illusion maps onto reality, however imperfectly. Color maps onto wavelength. Sound maps onto pressure waves. The feeling that time is flowing maps onto nothing. It is, as Buonomano puts it, an illusion without an external counterpart. It is closer to a hallucination than to a perception. Not in the casual sense of that word, not hallucination as metaphor, in the clinical sense. A hallucination is an experience your brain generates that does not correspond to any external stimulus. That is exactly what the feeling of temporal flow appears to be. The philosopher Craig Callender put it a different way that I find equally haunting. He said the equations of physics are like a map with no "you are here" marker. The map is complete, it describes everything, but there is nothing on it that tells you where or when you are. And this is where I want to make the turn. Because I think most people, when they hear all of this, file it under interesting but abstract, and go on with their day. And I understand that impulse. But I want to push you past it, because I think Buonomano is circling something genuinely profound, something that is not just a curiosity about physics, or a fun fact about neuroscience, but maybe the deepest unsolved question about what it means to be a conscious being in this universe. Here is the question. Why does the illusion exist? Evolutionary biology can explain every other brain illusion. Color perception exists because distinguishing ripe fruit from unripe fruit is useful. Sound perception exists because detecting predators at a distance is useful. Pain exists because avoiding tissue damage is useful. Every illusion your brain produces can be explained by its survival value. The illusion correlates with something real, and tracking that real thing helps you stay alive long enough to reproduce. But what survival value does the flow of time have? You might say, well, obviously. You need to know that time is passing so you can plan, so you can anticipate, so you can avoid dangers and seize opportunities. And yes, that is true. But notice that none of that requires the subjective feeling of flow. A robot can plan. A robot can predict. A thermostat anticipates temperature changes and adjusts accordingly. None of them experience the present moment as sliding forward. The computational work of processing time can be done, is done by every computer on Earth, without any accompanying experience of temporal flow. So why do we have it? One possibility is that it is a byproduct, a side effect of the way our brains encode temporal information. Buonomano suggests that because our brains evolved to navigate three-dimensional space, to build maps, to track objects, to orient ourselves spatially, we might be forced, by the architecture of our neural hardware, to represent time as if it were a spatial dimension. We lay it out on a mental number line. We put the past to the left and the future to the right, or the past behind us and the future ahead, depending on your culture. We treat time as a kind of space. And here is the twist. What if that neural habit, treating time like space, is the reason the block universe seems so natural to us? What if the reason physicists look at the equations and see a four-dimensional block is not because the universe is a four-dimensional block, but because the physicists are using brains that cannot represent time any other way? This is Buonomano's most radical suggestion, and I want to be honest. I do not know if he is right. Maybe I am just not smart enough to fully evaluate the argument. But the suggestion is this. Maybe time is not a dimension. Maybe the block universe is not the correct picture. Maybe there is something else going on with time. Something that our spatially oriented brains literally cannot conceive. And the reason we think the block universe is real is the same reason Siffre thought only 151 days had passed. Our brains are lying to us. Not about the flow of time this time, about the nature of time itself. And if that is true, then we are in a very strange situation. We have a brain that generates an illusion of flowing time that does not correspond to anything in physics. And we have a physics that describes a frozen block that might not correspond to anything in reality. Two layers of deception. Two illusions stacked on top of each other. I want to bring in one more thread before I close this out, because it connects to something I find deeply strange. Buonomano mentions, almost in passing, but it stuck with me, that certain substances and certain extreme states alter our perception of time in ways that are deeply revealing. THC, the active compound in cannabis, is well known to distort temporal perception. Under its influence, minutes can feel like hours. Music seems to slow down, individual notes becoming more distinct, more separated, as if the brain's temporal resolution has increased. Extreme fear does something similar. The famous slow motion effect during car accidents or falls, where people report that time seemed to stretch. But here is the detail that I think is really important. These distortions go in both directions. Time can speed up, time can slow down. The brain has a kind of dial, a clock speed setting, and it can be turned in either direction by chemistry or circumstance. And that means your normal experience of time, the rate at which the present seems to flow, the speed of the river, is not fixed. It is not a fact about the world. It is one setting on a dial, one calibration, one particular tuning of a neural parameter that evolution happened to land on because it was useful on the African savanna. You could, in principle, experience time twice as fast, or half as fast, or in a way that has no analogy in your current experience at all. And you would have no way of knowing from the inside that your setting was different from anyone else's, because the only clock you have is the brain that is generating the illusion. This is, I think, what makes the cave experiments so unsettling. Siffre, Le Guin, Follini, they did not just lose track of time, they experienced a fundamentally different rate of temporal flow. Their brains, cut off from external anchoring, drifted to a different setting. And there was nothing in their conscious experience to tell them they had drifted. The illusion felt exactly the same. It was just wrong. If you have followed me this far, through the caves, through the editing suite in your skull, through Clive Waring's Perpetual Awakening, through the relativity of simultaneity, and the block universe, and the illusion with no physical counterpart, if all of that is your kind of thing, then subscribing is probably a good idea, because where this channel goes next is even deeper down the rabbit hole. I want to end with something that has genuinely haunted me since I read it. The physicist Brian Greene, one of the greatest living communicators of physics, someone who has spent decades explaining string theory and cosmology to the public, once said something that I think about almost every day. He said, "If you ask me this question during working hours, I will tell you that the flow of time is an illusion. But in the evening, when critical thought gives way to the routine of ordinary life, it is hard not to feel that the first view is right." Think about what that means. One of the smartest physicists on Earth can only believe what his own equations tell him during office hours. The moment he steps away from the blackboard,